Hello there. In today's video we're going to talk about a principle of the endgame that is extremely important, and at the same time it's very often neglected by players of all playing strengths. And we're talking about king activity here. It's quite common that this idea is overlooked because in the middle game the king has to be kept safe behind its own pawns, while in the transition to the endgame, suddenly the king has to become active and it starts to look like an attacking piece. So in the next few examples we're going to take a look at today, we're going to see how to use king activity effectively in different scenarios. So let's just dive in. Let's start with the king and pawn endgame, which is, I think, the clearest example of how king activity works, because the king is the only really active piece. The rest of the pieces are really pawns that tend to fall victim to the king, which is now the most important and strongest piece alive. So in this endgame, I was playing with the black pieces against a pretty strong opponent. He was 300 rating points above me. I was doing quite well. I was quite happy with this position. It was a while ago, but I remember quite vividly what was going on here. I thought that I was going to draw this game. I'm playing with the black pieces, and if you look at it right now, my king seems to be better placed than my opponent's because it's on d5, while his king is still on the third rank. It's not gonna last though. This doesn't mean that we're winning or anything. I was happy with this, but white plays b4 and things change suddenly because I have to make a rather tough call. If I take, he takes on b4, and this is what I played, and it turned out to be a very bad mistake. We're going to see why. The problem is that if I somehow allowed b5 or a4, white might just start pushing, so it's not like I just can make waiting moves here, except a6. This kept everything together in this position. If white takes, I take back and I'm completely fine. I keep my king active, and if white plays a4, I take on b4, and yeah, he's making some inroads, he's improving his king. Now I play king c6, but it's not the end of the world. I can keep the draw just by moving between d6 and c6. Of course the pawns could be pushed forwards. It's going to end up in a lock, completely locked down on the king side. But he can never enter into b5, and if he tries to get to my a6 pawn, I can always defend it, and the king will just have to go back. So he's not making progress here, even though his king is slightly better. It's just not enough to win. But what did I do in this endgame after b4? Well, I took, which is not losing in itself, but in practice it is. It's a terrible move. It's a terrible move. If I had just calculated some moves forwards, I would have noticed why. But to be honest, I didn't really notice, even after the game. Only analyzing at home, I realized how bad the move was. And the reason is, after king takes b4, now his king is extremely active, going after my a7 pawn. And during the game, I saw king c6, which is incidentally the losing move, even though it looks like the only move in the position. We're going to get back to this position after analyzing what happened, because it's very interesting how black can make the draw, even though it's a crazy computer line. So I played king c6 here, the most natural move in the position, and white went king a5, and that king has purpose. It's just going after my a7 pawn. And that's a big problem, because the only way I can stop him from playing king a6 is playing king b7 myself, but my king's position takes a big hit there. It's now on my second rank, and suddenly white gets a way more powerful king on the fifth rank, and that's going to decide the game, believe it or not. I mean, the relative strengths of the kings is just going to be too much. I can't go after his pawn. I'm never getting there. King a6, king c4, king takes a7, king b3. Yeah, I get to his pawn, but unfortunately he's going after my whole king side, and I have to spend a tempo there taking, and white is just way closer to my pawn, so I'm losing this position. So instead, I decided to go king b7 and white plays king b5, confirming that his king is way better than mine, even though everything else looks equal. I played a terrible move here, another very bad conceptual mistake. I played a6 check, which is just giving him more entry points to go after my pawn. And that's a big problem. The pawn a7 at least didn't allow a possible invasion like king b6. So in this position, it was better for black to just take a waiting stance. I probably have to lock down the king side. This is eventually going to happen. It will be very normal for the pawns to get locked in, something like this. At some point, we're both running out of moves, and then the attention is turned to the queen side again. But then it becomes apparent that his king is way better than mine. If I just try to follow him around with king c7 here, king d5, he's just entering here and taking all my pawns. I'm way too slow to go after his a3 pawn, which is rather too far removed from my own king. a5, f5, but something like this was probably my best chance because we'll promote roughly at the same time, even though his king will be very close to my h5 pawn and just probably win. Another way in which this could have happened was if I just went king a6, for example. King d6, king a5, king e6, king a4, king f6, king takes a3, king takes g6, a5, king takes f5, a4, king g6, king b3, and it's a pawn race. And, well, black is promoting first in this case, but white should be winning. It has 2 pawns on the king side. It's going to be 2 extra pawns because that pawn on h5 is basically gone. There are still some practical difficulties, at least. I mean, I could hope for a draw. Well, objectively, I'm lost. But this was the best I could do at this point. But what did I do? A6. Terrible. I mean, his king is way better than mine, and I'm offering him a way in to take my pawn. With that pawn a7, I could play king d7 without king b6 being a thing. But now, I don't have that privilege. So my opponent just started pushing the king side, knowing that at some point it's going to be locked down. g3, h5, h4, g6. And I'm running out of moves very soon. He played king d5 here. And I should probably go for the same, even though we know it's completely losing. I went king d7, king e5, king e7. And it looks like I'm winning opposition, but he has what we call a reserved tempo. He can move the pawn and put me in Suk1 instead. So he's getting into f6. And I'm quite hopeless there. King d7, king f6, king c6, king takes g6. He's destroying my whole king side and then pushing the f pawn. And in the game I just played a5 instead, but the king goes the other way and takes my a5 pawn, so I just resigned. So how did I lose from this starting position? It looks absurd, and it's to be noted that I wasn't a particularly weak player. I was 2000 elo, about 2000 elo actually. My opponent was 2350. And notice that he hadn't gotten anything out of the opening and the middle game. I was in a completely equal endgame, and, well, just by not adjusting appropriately, I lost. By just activating his king, c takes b4 is terrible. I should have fought to keep my king closer to the center. With a6 stopping b5, or even king c6, and even a move like this. Because this time around, I'm not giving him the opportunity to cross to the 5th rank. Yeah, his king is slightly, very slightly more active than ours, but that's it. And he doesn't get the privilege of just running towards the king side, because I could easily get closer to his pawn, way quicker than in the other version, where I have the king on b7, it takes forever to go after the a3 pawn. So just keeping my king slightly more active, I was completely fine. But I still want to take a look at one more moment. King takes b4. This is the real mistake, c takes b4, because in practice it was absolutely impossible for me to find what follows. There's only one move to draw the game in this position, but I don't think it's practically possible if I started this way especially. It was h5. And there are so many tricks behind this move, and what I like about it for our theme is that it's crucial that our king keeps itself active. So in some lines I can generate counterplay against the kingside pawns, and that's what keeps me alive here. For example, after king b5, it's going after the a7 pawn, h4, I just keep my pawn closer to his pawn so I may get counterplay against h3. If king a6, now king c4, and I'm going after the a3 pawn, and we had said that this seems to be too slow for black, but that's with the pawns not being so advanced, with the pawns h7, g7, and f7. This pawn is allowing some counterplay now apparently. I just go after his pawns too, and yeah, even though white gets to the pawns rather quickly, I finally get to this, and the pawn h4 is helping. If king takes f4 here, king e2, f3, king f2, this one is so close to promoting that white can't just go after the g7 pawn and promote his own pawn. So white is even in some, well, he's not in trouble. He can easily draw by means of king g4, king takes h4, king takes f3, king g5, king g2, h4, king g3, and I'm always hitting this pawn, so there's no win here. King g6, king g4, and we're gonna trade the pawns, and it's gonna be a draw. But quite hard to notice. I mean, this h5 allows some incredible counterplay in very strange variations. The other important move here was king b5, h4. What if he starts with a4? Well, suddenly I can play this incredible move, king d6. And I'm trying to get back into c7 and defend the a7 pawn. If he pushes a5, now king a6, and it's different. Even though his king is now more active, his pawn is also quite close to my own king. So now the king doesn't have the time to go after the kingside pawns, because I just play king a6 and king takes a5. It's way closer to me, so I don't have to spend all that time just to go after the a3 pawn and only then push. Now white's king is committed to defending its own a pawn, so it's going to be a draw by repetition, most likely king b5, king c7, and that's gonna be it. That king d6 is a very mysterious move, honestly. I'm just trying to make him push the pawn forward so it's closer to my king, and he can't really activate his own king to go after my kingside pawns. And king a6, I could just play king c5 with the same idea we've seen before. The pawn h4 is giving me counterplay against this, which is insane. It's very, very difficult to see. And one more interesting idea is that h4 even loses. If he wants to prevent me from playing h4, now I win. I play king d4, a4, f5, king b5, of course he's going after my pawn, f4, king a6, and now a very nice tactical idea that if you want you can stop the video here and try to find it. It's a very nice breakthrough. I'm going to show it. It's f3, sacrificing a pawn because I'm going to make a pass pawn by tactical means. So if white just pushes, now my pawn is way too advanced and the king is incidentally very active. I'm getting to take the pawn f2 extremely quickly, way more quickly than white can do himself. Well, in this case I put the king the wrong on the wrong square. It should be on b6. So after a8 I'll be promoting with check and taking the queen, and then winning the king and pawn endgame. So oh, sorry, just one more thing, because in this case, of course, I shouldn't go king e3. I should just take on g3, and that's why I'm winning. I'm taking this one too, even if white plays it all right like this, and and he doesn't get the skewer on this diagonal, it's still quite losing for him. I could play queen f6 check, capture this pawn, and with the 2 extra pawns, I should be definitely winning. So let's go back. What if white takes on f3? f3 is a sacrifice after all. If he takes, now I play g5. That's the breakthrough idea, and this pawn is going to promote. After h takes g5, I'm not letting this one run away. I just play king e5, and white can resign right here. This pawn is not being stopped by anyone. And I'm just going to push h4, h3, h2, and make a queen if g6, king f6, nothing happens. White is in no time to promote his own pawn either. I'm way faster in this case, and I promote, and white doesn't even get to a7 in time. So pretty incredible resources that only the engine shows, but of course, after b4 in practice, if you play c takes b4, it's clear that you didn't understand that the king should be kept as active as possible, because the line we're normally going to calculate is this one. And after king b7, white's king is way better. There's no way you play this and then calculate something like h5. But well, let's go on to the next example, which is from a student's game. This time there are knights on the board too. It plays out similarly to a king and pawn endgame, but with more pieces. And it's very interesting that this position should, of course, be a draw, but whoever gets to the center with the king first always has some little pull. At this point, there doesn't seem to be anything better to do also. So the principle is centralize your king. It was white to play. My student was playing with the black pieces, his opponent with white. We're talking about 1,500 players with the white pieces, and my student around 1,200, even though probably underrated at this point. And white should play king f1. Of course, the race is to see who gets to c4 or c5 first. And if white starts this way, he's getting to c4. By no means this is a guarantee of a win, but it's a very slight imbalance in white's favor. Everything else being equal, a slight advantage of a slightly better king could be a big deal. Maybe white can hold, definitely, but I would take white every day. In any case, what white does is a conceptual mistake. He pushes a4, which is bad on so many different levels. Because if you consider the last example, one of white's problems if he pushed the pawn too far is that it's more accessible to our king. Now, if we get to b4, that pawn is compromised. So it definitely wasn't a priority to push that pawn. Now, black correctly played king f8, king f1, king e7, king e2, and suddenly, who's getting there first? Well, it's black. But my student makes a mistake here. He plays king e6. And clearly we were heading for c5. I mean, if we get here, king d3, king to c5, this is rather annoying. I mean, white, apparently, according to the engine, is still fine after knight e4, king before knight e6, but he's really relying on some on some tactics, which is far from being ideal. I'll still take black here. I'm just capturing this pawn probably. It's not clear to me how white is going to create enough counterplay in this case. Completely unnecessary at the very least for white. So after king d6, we're reaching c5. Apparently the best was to play knight e4 check, king d5, king d3, so he's not letting us in. But after knight e6, of course, we're holding some advantage here. And white is the one who has to play accurately, which is a very important thing with so reduced material. So anyway, he went king e6, king d3, knight d5, and white also disregards the idea of king activity and just takes. Which doesn't lose, by the way. This is not a losing move. But the whole point is that in this endgame, only black can win now. And white has to be careful for no reason. Absolutely, it wasn't necessary to give black the privilege of having the slightly better king in an otherwise completely equal endgame. He should play knight e4, avoiding the exchange. Now the black king doesn't have easy access to c5 because that knight is controlling everything. He's actually threatening check and, well, it's a fork against the king and the pawn. So this way, white should have held easily. And I would even say that black has to be somewhat careful. I mean, now white's king has a clear trajectory to c4. So knight takes d5. Now it's only two results for black. Either you win or you make a draw. And how could this go wrong? White is still lucky that he has some important squares under control and nothing is too terrible. I mean, it's very similar to the endgame we've seen in the sense that if white plays king c3, well, we have to stay around here because white also has his own active ideas going after our pawn. And the e3 pawn is essential because it covers d4. So white could even just play king b3 and stay here playing king c3, king e3, and it's most likely a draw with some care because we are really not invading. So you can imagine what white did here. Not only he has the worst king, but he's allowing the black king in. He's giving us another entry point. That's a terrible move. And we're talking about quite strong players here. 1500 is a player that is very much able to play good chess. And this is still a big conceptual mistake. So now we have access to these two squares, or at least we have a clear idea to get into those. So of course we play king c5, king c3, and maybe black saw that. He was keeping the opposition, but it's very shaky because Suxuan could just be terminal for white here. I mean, once we start pushing these pawns and it ends up in a lockdown on the king side, suddenly white will have to make a move. And my student here made a big conceptual mistake that is extremely instructive. The last thing he wants is to play a5, and that's what he played. What's the reason it's so bad? Because this is what we have as a reserve tempo to just give our opponent the move. Imagine this was completely locked already. If black plays a5, suddenly it's white to move and he's dead. If he goes king b3, we invade through d4. And if he goes through d3, we invade through b4. But what's the problem with playing a5 right now? That we're just playing in more equal terms because white doesn't have this option. I mean, he doesn't have that reserved tempi. So white just locked the queen side down right away with a5. Makes no sense. We should have played to just lock down the king side first. In this case, many moves work. I mean, both g5 and h5. What I like about g5 is that there are no ideas for pawn breaks or anything. So we're going to lock down the king side pretty fast. Let's say g4, f6, f3, and suddenly our extra tempo adds up. We just play a5 and white is in Suxuan. Now we just invade. We go to take that pawn f3. If he went the other way, king d3, king b4, and he's done. So it was just a matter of using this reserve tempo when it counted the most. And black played it right now. White reacted quite well. He goes h4, h5, g3, g6, f4, f6, and all white needed to calculate was for him not to get into Suxuan. And now we don't have a reserve tempo to give him back the move. In this case, he played king d3, and we can't really go after his pawn. That's another very nice nuance here. What if king b4? What happens if king b4? Well, it's very similar to the game we just saw. White suddenly can suddenly threaten to create a passed pawn with f5. G takes f, e takes f, and unfortunately for us, we can't really take. If we take the pawn, then g4, and it's a breakthrough. White gets a passed h-pawn, and we're losing. So king c5 holds the draw here. We're just gonna keep our king close enough so that we can stop that that h-pawn. In fact, after g4, instead of taking, we'll just go king to d6 here, because if g takes h5, we get there in time. So it should be a draw. In the game, after king d6, well, it was declared a draw for similar reasons. In this case, what black saw quite correctly was that if king c4, his opponent is losing. And here again, you can think why. You can try to discover why. Now I'm going to show the move. Black suddenly uncorks e takes f4, g takes f4, and we want this pawn to be passed. So again, we go for tactics with g5, and suddenly white is losing. F takes g, h takes g, h4. That king is not in the square of white's pawn, of black's pawn, sorry. So he's not getting there in time. King d3, h3, king e2, h2, and it's not stopping that one. So that's why, well, white just accepted the draw. He didn't go in. You probably have to stay around here and just claim the draw. So very interesting how king activity decides here, because all things being equal, black is the only one who can prevail in a position like this. Even after a5, which was a mistake, denying black of this tempo to put white in Zugzwang at the appropriate moment. Even here, if by moving the pawn suddenly it's black to move, well, the worst thing that can happen is that you have to go back. You go back to b6, and after king c4, you win opposition. You don't allow the white king in. So it's going to end up in a draw. But if it's white to move at the end of the day, he may have to allow us to invade. So only white is the one who has to be careful. Even here, g4 would be a huge mistake. That's why white tried to create tactical counter chances with a break on f4, because here we just play g5, f3, f6, and suddenly white loses again because he is left in Zugzwang. So king activity is what decides, just not by that much apparently. The king is only slightly better placed than white's king, but it's still enough sometimes to invade the opponent's position and win outright. Let's show one more example. This is a game I was playing with the black pieces against a strong opponent. It was a while ago, I think 2005. And I had the upper hand. I'm showing it from white's perspective because it was very important for white to remember the concept we're examining here, and he would have been fine, even though it looks like black has a very active position. Well, I did. My rooks are on the second rank after all, and I really want to go after the pawn on c3. It wasn't that easy. I mean, my plan could be king c5 and king c4 definitely, but white always has this intermediate check, king before check, and if I take the pawn c3 with the king, white could just play rook takes b5. So my idea was in general to exchange one pair of rooks, then go rook a5, so I could play king c5, king c4, and if white had a rook to check, I could take with my rook defending the pawn. Quite elaborate, it would be difficult, but that was more or less what I was thinking of. But it was white to play, and I would like you to think what your move would be here, because white looks awfully passive, and rook endgames activity is even more important, and rooks were not made to just defend pawns. They have to be active, they have to attack stuff. It's not so easy because you can't really activate the rook on f1. If you go rook h1, rook takes f2, it's curtains. So it was essential for white to unravel, and the move was g4, temporarily sacrificing a pawn just to get this king free. After f takes g, king g3, white can hold this. It's very holdable. After rook c takes b2, let's say I'll follow my plan. White gets his pawn back. I kind of get it. It seems like black gets to c3 pawn way too quickly, but after rook c2, king takes g5, black plays rook takes c3. White could hold the draw with f4. He's just giving up the pawn, but the f pawn is so fast that he's just holding quite easily here. After rook takes c3, f5, this pawn will cost my rook, definitely. And it's just too fast. And my king, well, if I bring it to just support my pawns, f6, rook to e8, f7, rook f8, king f6. Black also starts launching his pawns forwards. What will happen is that I will eventually give up my rook, and white's king will be too far away from the pawn. So it's a draw. It's a draw with best play. Rook d1, b4, king f5, b3, king f4. White's king is close enough. Here black can't really make progress. For example, king c3, king e3, king c2, rook d2 check, and white sacrifices the rook for the pawn and then takes the other one. For example, king c1, rook takes b2, king takes b2, king takes d3, it's a draw. It's not necessary to calculate all this. It's just a matter of concept to some degree. Of course, calculation is important, and I think if white had seen the resource of misclick, of playing a quick f4 here, he might have gone for this. I'm not entirely sure, but I really think that he probably saw this, and after f4 he saw that his pawn was hanging, which is something I was counting on, honestly. But turns out activity was more important. His king would be very active and he will hold the draw by pushing the f-pawn. But the problem is the move white plays in the game is just too much. He went back. It was just better to say, okay, I pass, it's your turn. King g1 just gets the king to a worse square. The fact is that if you don't play g4, you kind of have to play it, because if you move the rook, you lose the pawn on c3. If you move the other one, it's even worse. You lose the pawn f2. So it's kind of understandable. He was in Sux one if not, but g4 was the clear alternative. And after king g1, I also didn't play the best. I played rook e2, which I really don't understand right now. I guess it had to do with the fact that if king g2 now I can take. There's that little trick. If he wants to activate the king like this, he's just dropping the pawn because f2 is pinned. It was probably that. But in reality, what I want is to keep this king in a lock, in a cage. So I should play g4 myself. It was by far the strongest move. And now I can follow my plan of getting my king involved by exchanging one pair of rooks, defending my b pawn, and start pushing my king all the way to c4. And that was the way to go. And during many moves, we should have both played g4 most likely. White played rook b4 here, which is something that really I found really annoying. It's true that g4 this time around probably doesn't work. Pawn takes king g2. I have rook takes c3 every time white plays king g2. But rook b4 is, well, was kind of a nasty surprise. The problem is now g4 is really a threat. A lot of pawns are coming off the board. It's going to be very tough because g5 will become a target quite quickly. So I just went for rook e2 b2. And now white could play the very same thing, g4 again, even though it costs a pawn. Rook takes, pawn takes, f takes g4, and this time this isn't the way, because after rook b2, rook takes, and then the pawn is defended. But white now activates the rook in turn. And if king d6, rook c5 and b5 falls, and it's most likely a draw again. So white kept the rook with rook d4 instead, but g4 is essential at all times. My problem is that now g4 isn't as effective because rook f4 is coming. With the rook on the 4th rank, this is the problem. He defends the pawn, attacks f5. The two rooks become very active. Even if I win the c3 pawn, it's not clear at all. So g4 now is not so good. So I was still chasing his rook. And again, g4 was quite strong. After rook takes, it takes, f takes g4, rook e1. Again, it's a mess. Now the rook is getting in, and it's not clear at all what's going on. Rook c2, rook e3 defends the pawn, and then again he can bring the king. So there were many opportunities for white to activate with g4. But what's going to cost him dearly here is that his king is way too passive on g1. This was the last chance to go g4. Even here it works. Even here it's enough to hold. And I'm way past I'm way past the variation where white played g4 at the beginning, because white just wasted some tempi here, and he's still holding incredibly. After b3, for example, rook e1 defends the pawn. Now he goes f4 too, so it's definitely balanced this time around. b2, rook b1, rook c2, f4, and white has his own counterplay with the f pawn. So yeah, at all times it was essential to think about this poor king. And it wasn't only my opponent. I mean, I didn't think about it either. For example, after rook a1, I just went rook c2, and white played a terribly passive move. This was the time to play rook a8, not allowing rook takes c3 because of the check, and the rook is also activating, attacking pawns from behind maybe. And this would have been tough. I mean, if king b7, rook d8, attacking d5, it's never easy with a rook that's so active and you have weaknesses such as the ones I do have. So after rook a3, now king c5, and now this king is getting in. Rook b3, and now my plan. I mean, if I play king c4, check, and I have to go back, unfortunately, because I don't want to lose the b5 pawn. This b5 pawn is my hope to win this game. So I played rook a2 with the idea of rook a5, then king c4, and I'll be able to get the pawn on c3. So king g2, finally, the king steps up. And again, g4 is the practical thing to do. I wasn't really thinking about his king being a factor even here, but it could have been. After rook a5, my opponent played g4. I thought it was easy, and this time it's winning. I mean, white wasted way too much time, and the difference in this case, after rook b1, is that I can play king c4, and my king is more active than his. I mean, his king is getting nowhere. I play king c4, king g3, king takes c3, king takes g4. This is way too fast. White doesn't even get to play king takes without allowing d4 with check, and then even the pawn is going to promote. So that was definitely decisive. But what did I do? I sent the rook forwards, and here I gave my opponent a golden opportunity, even though it was really hard. It was really hard to make the draw. But my opponent went rook first, then rook b4 to take here, and in that case my pawns will be way faster than his, because I'm taking on c3 too quickly, playing b4, and white is barely taking these 2 pawns while I'm already going to promote the b pawn. But king g3 allowed white to draw the game in kind of a weird way, honestly. And it was quite impossible that we'll calculate this. b4, king takes g5, b3, and white's problem is that he can't really push without dropping this pawn, and black's pawns this time around are really close to promotion. And white had to find this maneuver, king f6. And only after king c4, now king f5, and it's a very weird mutual succession position where black doesn't have any useful moves. If king d3, I play rook b2, and the king doesn't get in, and rook c2 drops the pawn, so while black would have to go back, and we'll go back to b1. So the king is not invading. If rook c2, I manage to play f4 here, and well, I also get a mobile pawn. And yeah, those two are the big options for black here, but he's not making progress. Now, what's interesting is that this is a mutual Zugzwang position. If we get to the same position, but with white to play, white is lost. After king e5, rook c2 is very effective, because after f4 there's rook c3, and that pawn is falling with check. And then this pawn is going to be running forwards. So they're very, very tough to see, very inscrutable. So yeah, I mean, rook b4 was a mistake, and king g3 was the main option, but it was rather hard to see that white had to waste the tempo there by playing that king f6, king f5. It was very computerish. So I played rook a4, rook b1, repeated here, my opponent gets the chance again. But after rook b4, finally I took. Finally realizing that my king is way better than his. After rook g4, b4, rook takes, b3, and two big factors in my favor. My pawn is way too advanced, and my king is way more active than his. I mean, this king is not doing anything. So rook g4, g8, sorry, rook c4, with the idea of just blocking in case of rook b8. I just play rook b4 and promote. Check. The king gets in, and well, white resigned if rook b8 check, king c3, with the idea of b2, rook b4, and that pawn is going to be a queen. So you see how in many different scenarios king activity is crucial, and how different players of very different strength can make terrible mistakes in these scenarios. And this was a game between a 22 and a 2300. I was 2300 when this was played, and we both ignored at many points how white could have gotten big counterplay by pushing g4 and king g3. I should have played g4 at so many instances in this game, and white had g4 to draw the game so many times that it's almost embarrassing. But you see how materialism sometimes prevails, and how big of a factor king activity can be. So thanks a lot for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe and leave a like. I'll be seeing you very soon in the next video. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.